While we wait for the data to start populating your account, it's worth taking a moment to talk about how we manage our account and keep it secure. Overall, Google's goal has been to make Google Analytics both easy to use, but still incredibly powerful, which can be a difficult balancing act. Before we dive into the reports and the analysis tools available, let's discuss a few things about the ecosystem of Google Analytics itself. The first thing to talk about is how the levels of Google Analytics are nested. At the top of the hierarchy is the Google Analytics account. This is your login, your password to all the Google services, Gmail, Hangouts, Analytics, AdWords, and so on. As we've touched on before, you create your Google Analytics account with your overall Google user login, and the difference between those two can be a little bit confusing, but it is important to know that your account for Google Analytics is different than your Google account. Now, while you start with one Google Analytics account when you first begin using Google Analytics, you can actually create numerous accounts all nested under that one Google account according to your business needs. This account level usually serves as the entity for an entire business's analytics reporting. So as long as you just have one singular business you'll want to report on, we suggest you just stick to that one account for the business. But you may consider having access to several accounts if, for example, your position requires analyzing multiple clients' websites, or like you see in this slide, maybe you have one for your personal website and maybe one for your company, and they're both tied back to your one account. Or if your company has multiple brands and you have multiple different sites that are completely unique entities, you could have different accounts for those as well. Now, within an account is at least one property. We generally recommend a business to have a property for each website or platform. And by platform, I mean, for example, if you have both a website and an application for your business, like a mobile application, you may have two properties and that will report on each individual platform. So one for web, one for the mobile apps. Now, within each of those properties are something called views. Views are really powerful, and advanced users are going to find all kinds of ways to tweak them, but they can be a little bit confusing at first, and we're not going to dive really deep into them in this course, other than just to explain what they are. Think of each view like a lens into that database that can be configured completely independently of the others. For example, in one view, you may want to have data from just California, or maybe you have multiple country domains that feed into this one account, but you can create these views that are going to separate out just your French site, for example. In some ways, it's like you have a duplicate data set that tracks that same site and it's all coming from that one tracking code you put on, but they can be configured completely differently. And that goes for both the data and for the permissions that you're going to give users. We'll see that in just a minute. Now, you can create up to 50 of these views. Every web property should have at least 3 views. If you're going to experiment and go down that route, everyone should create at least these 3. So first, it's often useful to have a main reporting view where you can do the majority of your analysis. This can be the current one that it creates for you. Second, you should have a test view where you can make some mistakes. You can try new filters. You can generally mess with things and see what happens with no fear of hurting your actual data. So create that view that's just for testing. Lastly, you're going to have a raw, unfiltered view that's just the pristine data. No filters on it whatsoever. It captures all the data, and that way you can make sure at least then you have all the data if you ever need to go back and take a look at it. Because remember, the data that comes through this view, if you filter it, it's going to be processed through that filter way before it even reaches your reporting interface. And what that means is you can't go back and revert the data back to its raw form once you've filtered it. Because of that, it's really this best practice to have this unfiltered view that acts as a bit of insurance policy against any mistakes you might make in your main reporting or, particularly your testing one. You can always go back and check that raw, unfettered data. Now, let's move into the tool and take a quick look at how we move across these accounts, properties, and views. If we go up here and click on here, we have our accounts, we have our properties, and we have our views across here. Now on the top, we can star a view. We can go up here and click and it'll show us our starred views. Now, of course, we only have one here, as well as our recent. So it's a way we can organize if you start getting lots of these inside of here. If you want to create new properties and views, we'll look at the admin section a bit later, but you can come over here and create property, create view. So we talked about creating those 3 views. You could do so right here. And lastly, we want to talk about the search navigation here. If you get quite a few of these in here, you can search through them and filter that way as well. So we're going to come back to the admin tab here, but I want to give you a quick sense of how these properties, views, and accounts all work together. We'll look at the admin tab in a minute, but what we're going to do now is we're going to turn our attention to the data that's inside your account.